The face of the professional wrestling landscape is one mostly taken up by Vince McMahon's shit-eating grin, laughing as he hoovers up talent from all across the planet and plonking them inside his own carnival soap show. And you know what? Fair play to the man. He's built a company that's attracted some of the best wrestlers in the world and given them a massive stage to perform on. Yet, there's an unsightly blemish that he desperately wants you to ignore, and that, my friends, is the independent wrestling promotions, filled to bursting point with amazing talent. In short, it's something that the WWE wants you to ignore, but unfortunately, it ain't going away. With this in mind, I'm Jules for WhatCulture.com, and these are 7 things WWE doesn't want you to know about independent wrestling. Number 7. It's not just flippy shit. One of the main reasons that Will Ospreay's flippy t-shirt sold so well is A, because it's attached to a man who possesses an unbelievable array of moves in his arsenal, a style entirely his own, and a commitment to gymnastics that is mind-blowing, and B, because flippy is a piss take of anyone who looks at this stuff and can't see it for what it really is. Because flippy isn't all what independent wrestling is about. It's a stage in which technical masterpieces can be shown off alongside 2 hefting lads stiff-chopping their out of each other. People often think that indie wrestling is set inside zero-G arenas, but it's simply not, and you'll find people applauding as loudly for a triple backflip as you will for a grounded technical striking sequence that will leave you genuinely wondering whether or not it was real. Number 6. It gets nostalgia right. Now, I hate to rag on this, but Raw 25 showed something that none of us wanted to see. The moment when nostalgia ran mild and really did little for anyone involved. It was meant to be an expression of the glory days, but simply put, it rarely delivered on its promise of an Attitude-era barn burner. Nostalgia on the indie scene, however, is shown in its purest form. The wrestling styles that carry homages to the greats, the literal throwbacks like Kenny Omega entering dressed as the Terminator, but mostly it doesn't wheel it out for the gags. It presents it with awe and respect. I mean, look at Haku, who's still being treated like the hardest man in wrestling, and Cody Rhodes, who this year fought for his father's NWA belt years after WWE told the world the NWA didn't matter. It still draws money, and it's treated with a damn sight more respect. Number 5. It's funny. Let's face it, the WWE, more often than not, is about as funny as having to put down your family dog with a brick. It's a very slapstick affair and nearly always makes those involved in the comedy moments look stupid themselves. However, on the indie scene, there's a sense of comic awareness that can only be bred through not having a WWE creative collar on. Chris Jericho was heel gold in New Japan with his swearing. Joey Ryan's funeral was side-splitting, and the back and forth between Kenny Omega and Xavier Woods during their Street Fighter V matchup was brilliant. All because they were off the script, and all because on the indie scene, you can simply have more fun. Number 4. It's a meritocracy. Now, this is a really interesting point, and yet it's so simple in its premise. Because indie promotions aren't the same as the WWE's luxurious multi-brand TV deal events, they are almost solely driven by ticket sales. And that means one thing. If you're going to be a success, then you need to get over with the crowd. You won't see endless rematches involving unpopular performers. You won't see performers push beyond their ability levels purely to appease different markets that you want to break into. Hello, Jinder Mahal. You also won't have talent simply not showing up like Brock Lesnar because, simply put, you do not piss off indie fans. What you will see are people pushed up the card because the crowd wants them to be there. And that doesn't mean a card stacked full of baby faces, as absolute arseholes thrive in these scenes. I mean, just ask Gabriel Kidd, who's just about as much of a as you can be. In short, you don't just get the likes of Roman Reigns forced down your throat. Number 3. It's a more fertile talent breeding ground than the Performance Center. The WWE Performance Center is the most expensive pro wrestling training school ever constructed, and yet it boasts very few valedictorians. Now, Charlotte Flair was trained there exclusively, as was Braun Strowman. To date, they are the only real top 2 level performers of note to do anything of significance on the main roster, and I know that you'll be listing more below, but who has really changed the game as much as Flair and Strowman thanks to their time in the center? You can look at the likes of AJ Styles, who simply skipped this step to determine that it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's also clear the likes of Adam Cole could easily step onto the main roster, not because of having learned anything in the Performance Center, but because of his time on the indie scene. Now, don't get me wrong, it does help certain talent, but to say that it's a necessary part of the process is false, as their state-of-the-art tech has arguably done less than some gyms have for their wrestlers in terms of finding their style. Number 2, it's getting really big. Here's what your mum said to me last night. There's my one per list. But seriously, we have to address the fact that the WWE really doesn't want you to notice just how large the indie scene actually is. True, much of the promotions are much smaller than Vince's Oil Express, but they still pull in the numbers. I mean, look no further than All In, which was the biggest independent event, which sold out in just under an hour. That is a stat that would rightly worry the WWE suits. So while they almost jovially mock promotions like TNA and its inconsistent funding, they aren't so quick to make fun at some sources that look to piss over their ticket sales slumps. And number 1, WWE is actively trying to kill it outright. So here's the thing. Everything that I've covered on this list is the stuff that the WWE knows. It just really doesn't want you to know. Recently, it turned out that in an attempt to butter up returning Tommy Dreamer, WWE offered to pay him a sizable sum of money to simply close down his indie league, House of Hardcore. They tried to frame it like they were trying to close it down out of concerns for violence. However, it's clearly because it perceives this avenue to be a threat. Similarly, the WWE crowned a UK champion mere weeks after World of Sport announced that they were returning to Old Blighty, and was accompanied by tons of no-compete clauses for wrestlers that barred them from wrestling for that emerging company. It's not because it just happened to be the right time for the WWE, but because it was a reaction to the threat of losing territory. You know what? This isn't a bad thing. For us, this is what you might call a wrestling renaissance, as we're reaping the rewards with every amazing match that you can catch on the indie scene. And maybe, just maybe, it'll force the WWE to pull up their socks when quality wins out over quantity.